when we look at Africa and Europe, Mr. President, I don't know if it is by design or not, but how do we relate ourselves as African states? How many borders are closed with very stringent crossing conditions? Mr. President, look at us. Where do we have any African visa? Common visa? No. Look at Europe. When you get one Schengen visa, Mr. President, you can fly to any country in Europe. So many several countries. Visa. How do we want us to compete if each one of us has a rope tied to his own bacon? The President, it's not our wishes, but look at ourselves also. Are we the problem of ourselves, or is this problem caused to us to remain the state we are? And who is causing them? Mr. President, look at when I want to fly from Nairobi to Rabat in Morocco. When I want to go and see my brother, my African brother in Morocco, from Nairobi, I don't have to get a direct flight. It's not there. I have to go through, if the easiest, I have to go through Paris. I have to run from Nairobi to Istanbul. I have to fly from Nairobi to Amsterdam, or Doha, or Casablanca, or Jeddah before I get to Rabat, or Brussels. Mr. President, it's easier to fly from Nairobi to Rabat. But what are these things that are making us very much fragmented? Now, Mr. President, look at how Europe is. We want to partner with it. Very good, I agree. But they have a currency. They are doing very well in the euro currency and whatever. Mr. President, Africa. Those are the challenges we have. When we train our young boys in technology, take them to school properly, it's the same Europe, Mr. President, that will buy them to work for them. Brain drain from Africa to Europe. Is it by design that we must remain down so that we don't compete properly? Mr. President, this is what we must think about. When I have been sitting here, Mr. President, I read a lot. I enjoy reading stories, this book called Things Fall Apart by Chinua Mokal Patachepe from Nigeria. When you go to page 20, Mr. Speaker, Mr. President, you will get a man called Okongwo going to ask Nwakibie to lend him palm seeds to go and plant. The President, that Nwakibie tells Okongwo that since boys have come to me to borrow without paying back, since Eneke the bat has learned to fly, since the man has learned to shoot without missing, Eneke the bat has tried to fly without patching. The President, as Africa, can we learn to fly without patching? Because maybe one continent, one partner has learned to shoot without missing. That is me and that's us. As we partner with Europe, as we partner with EU, let us see our weaknesses. If we can bring them together, we can compete properly. But currently we are competing in a weak state, and that is not favorable for any business. Thank you, Mr. President. Majimbo Kalasinga from Kenya.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to, let's talk as parliamentarians, apart from the official framework. I would like to speak frankly, more than anyone else. I don't think that what is existing between Europe and Africa is partnership, because partnership is based on balancing. What is there between Europe and Africa is a kind of exploitative relationship. It is one party is benefiting, the other one is not benefiting. This relationship is old. My colleagues have mentioned already. So in my country, Mauritania, for example, in our relationship with European Union, we may present examples that apply to all Africa. So my country is in West Africa, and you know the challenges that this region is facing with regard to this relationship with Europe. The youth have. You have seen where the three countries have fallen as a result of European policies: Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger. Well, my country is not far from that. Chad has already been there. My colleague from Chad has already mentioned that. Well, and you see that the fear the country is facing when the last democratically elected government in Senegal has expelled French base that has been there for a century. My country is located in North Africa, and now we're exposed to a large number of migrants who are running away from their countries to Europe. And so the African countries are crying. Their countries wants to be like a police protecting European borders. And my colleague has just mentioned the Mediterranean Sea has seen large waves of migrants who died in the sea from Gambia, from Mauritania, from all these countries. This expresses a structural economic crisis. There is exploitation of resources from the main partner, which is Europe. So there is an international powers represented by China, Russia, China, and United States. Europe has retreated militarily and economically. So now, what is required from this partnership? This partnership should be based on fairness. You know that Europe has committed a lot of mistakes. European countries made a lot of mistakes in Africa, and these mistakes must be corrected, and so that you can be able to build real partnerships. What partnerships? What is happening now is something that is doing by regimes that are not representing their nation, their people. So we require that we have a real partnership that are based on sound basis. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Mr. President, we thank the speakers for their presentation. I think there will always be partnerships among continents, be it Africa, Europe, Africa, Asia. But with regard to the 25 years of partnership between Africa and Europe, the presenters revealed the state of play, and we know where the problem lies. The problem is internal. The problem is not Europe. Europe will always need Africa, and Africa as well will always need Europe. But we as Africans do have a problem. We are faced with challenges, and the solution to these challenges are neither in Europe, in Asia, nor in America. The solutions are in Africa. And if we are to effect change, then we should organize ourselves as Africans, build strong relationships. In the partnerships, usually we sign agreements. Our states, our presidents, our authorities usually do so to the detriment of their people. Let me take Senegal for an example. When the new authorities came to power, they cancelled all agreements that Senegal had previously signed with Europe on fishing, for example. But these agreements, we are all aware that these agreements were not beneficial to Senegalese people, given that since Europe is well equipped, they come with their vessels to Senegal to fish. But these agreements did not benefit Senegalese fishermen because they were no longer able to sustain their economic activities. What would follow is Most of these fishermen are going to leave Senegal for overseas, and sometimes in very dire conditions. So all of this is to say that we have a problem in Africa, and the solutions to these problems should be African solutions. We do have the potential. We have natural resources. We have everything we need to develop Africa, to change Africa, to give Africa a facelift. If we do not use African solutions, we'll always be starting from scratch. We'll always face the same situations, experience the same challenges. These partnerships or agreements are based and adopted upon clear rules. But these agreements are not even respected. And who are the ones who do not respect these agreements? Generally, we Africans are the ones who don't. So, to conclude, we Africans have a problem, and this Pan-African Parliament should be a pillar because we represent the suffering African population. We represent Africans who are facing challenges, and we need to know what is our responsibility as Africans to address these issues. And this responsibility, the people who have the responsibility to address these issues are our leaders, and sometimes they are the ones who put Africa in such dire situations. Thank you, Chairperson. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, the President of the Pan-African Parliament, and thank you for allowing me to take part in this very important debate. I just want to make a very short statement, and I would be very pleased to hear what our brother here has to say about it. For me, the relationship between Africa and the EU is very paradoxical. Paradoxical in the sense that I think Africa is a very important player in today's world, particularly in today's world. And the example I could give about this is the situation whereby one of the key components in today's industry is rare earth minerals. And those who have rare earth minerals today called the chun. We saw how China withheld rare earth minerals and the whole world shook. On the part of Africa, the importance of Africa is clearly demonstrated by the interest in which everybody in the world is having conversations with Africa. EU-Africa Summit, Russia-Africa Summit, China-Africa Summit, Japan-Africa Summit, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, you name it. Everybody wants to have a summit with Africa. Why? Everybody wants to have a summit with Africa. Why? Because Africa today is the last continent standing in terms of raw materials, in terms of resources which are required to make this world tick. And yet Africa gets a raw deal. Africa is treated as a child. Everybody dictates to Africa. And the last wake-up call we had, Mr. President, sir, was during COVID-19. Those who have got the wherewithals made vaccines, and they distributed them amongst their own people. Africa was the last to get these vaccines. We were promised that certain countries in Africa, I think it was Kenya, South Africa, Egypt, would be assisted to produce those vaccines. But as far as I am concerned, I haven't seen any progress in that respect. That is why I'm saying it's paradoxical. We are being treated as their poorer cousins. And for as long as Africa itself does not acknowledge that, we will go nowhere. We are willing to be pulled along in the dust instead of standing up and fighting for our rights. I think, with all fairness, the EU is not sincere in its partnership with Africa. If it was sincere, I think it would be investing in giving us resources so that we value add our resources, we beneficiate, and we stop exporting jobs. I think these developed countries should put their money where their mouth is. Then we will know that they're being sincere. Thank you, Mr. President.
Honorable members and my fellow African brothers, power has never been of respect, has never been prayed over. Respect has been earned and sustainably emanate from your action. There is no European or American that will think in your interest. There's no European or African that will think in your interest. And the road that brought us this identity as Africans, let's for a moment pause and think, if Kwame Nkrumah, Jomo Kenyatta, Mailumu Kambarage went to complain to the same slave masters that please treat us different, what would have been the end result? We need to take first action. And they say the greatest threat to freedom is the absence of criticism. As we sit here as Africans, how united are we? How respectful are we towards each other? So that that respect transcends in those who engage in us. You know, when you go into a field as a hunter, before you see or smell the snake, the hunter will know something is aroused in this field. So there is no European, there is no American. People hate Trump. I say Trump is the best thing that happened to Africa. Yes. Trump is the best thing that happened to us because he awakened. He's the only man that tells us the truth that we were failing to hear, which we know already. And therefore I submit to say, as Africans first before we engage the others, let's call each other and be sincere to each other. That sincerity that we have amongst each other will transgress into the respect of the next person. So it's because of my professor that I will stop short because I know he goes the detail. But I just wanted to say we can sit and talk to the same. You can't solve a problem by applying the same kind of thinking that has caused the problem. The Europeans, that's their strategy. That has been always, and that has produced results for them. Now you want them to solve the problem. Huh? Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable President. And I want to thank the moderator and the presenters. EU-Africa relation started since time immemorial. And we all witnessed exploration period when Europeans started coming to Africa. During the exploration period, there was an interest that was established. From the exploration period, we came into economic period where they started, dealing with the people, legitimate trade, and later we witnessed slave trade, which really affected our relationship and depopulated Africa. And our economy was really brought down, and it was to your advantage as Europe. Now, from the historical perspective, we came together to build nations, to make sure that we all benefit at the end of the day. And our relationship with Europe definitely pays dividend. And in some countries, it leads to economic development and economic prosperity. It leads to promotion of good governance. Democracies were advanced, developed. Peacekeeping missions were sponsored. So our core relationship or our core values were advanced. But if you look at the challenges are so high because the gap is so wide. The inequality between Europe and Africa is so wide. And we will not blame you for it totally, but we believe our relationship should be mutualistic and should be beneficiary to all. Now, it should not be exploitative, but instead, we build on our institutions like a Pan-African Parliament and the European Parliament. We believe we are all continental parliament. And as I said, we have a lot in common. And we have started from a far place. And we believe the competition between other advanced countries like China, Russia, in Africa is so high. But we need to look at what is our interest at this time. What is the interest of Africans with European relationship? Now, as far as aids are concerned, we've been seeing a lot of aids coming to Africa, from Europe. Yes, we acknowledge them. But these aids, how are they given? Are they sustainable? Are they there to support our institutions? Or are they there to enrich selfish politicians or governments to stay abusing the people more and more? So these are some of the things we need to really look into. Now, if we said, European Parliament is a legislative parliament, we have to look at the Pan-African Parliament. Are we a legislative parliament? What is missing along the line? So these are issues that, as cooperators or as co-workers or partners, we really need to look down into this thing. Now, when it comes to migration, I know migration is an issue and is always on top of your agenda. But how do you treat the migrants? The people leaving Africa to Europe. We need to look at that. How many of them are in concentration camps? How many of them are treated as human beings? Whether their fundamental human rights are protected or not. So we have been seeing abuses, or in fact, it leads to deaths, where migrants were shot to death in Germany. We went there. Gambian migrants were shot to death, and not only limited to Gambia. So we need to look at these issues as families on a real point of view, not on a biased scale, but on a balanced scale. Yeah, so I think today's debate is very timely, and we will not say it's exploitative, but there are gaps in our relationship. So we believe the governments, heads of states need to be serious with our relationship, and they need to know how our resources are going to be protected. Because we see a lot of European investments, like alluded by Honorable Toure of the Gambia, like the fishing agreement, between Europe and the Gambia. Yes, those agreements, I think, in fact, for that of Gambia, it has been stopped now. The agreement is not working. But we need to look at it. If Europe can seal its sea or its area ozone not to fish, to make sure that the juvenile fish grow, why are they reaping the juvenile fish from Africa? So these are the issues we need to look at all costs to make sure that we all develop alongside. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Bismillah.
In the name of God, most gracious, my name is Umayan from
Pan-Africa. I think I have to add something, because all of us as a African Parliament should speak about this issue, because I understand now that all of us, we feel the hurt that we are suffering from the inequality between us as a African Union and the European Union. As mentioned by the President, that win-win strategy should be the methods and the mechanism of dealing. We are the Africans, we are the rich continent, we are the youth continent, that our people are immigrants because of they are following, as mentioned by the colleague Amina, following their treasure of raw materials and raw minerals. So I think the partnership, as mentioned by my colleague from Mauritania, it shouldn't be like that. So I think we are colonized again because of our own raw materials. So the relationship and the partnership should be taken in a serious consideration, taking also in considerations the youth development, avoiding or stopping the immigrants flowing to Europe, because in Europe they are suffering from these immigrants, but they are dealing them badly as well. So they are taking their treasury, taking their raw materials, and when they come there, they are dealing with them in a bad way. So we are not accepting that, and I think it should be taking in consideration in a partnership. Another thing I have to mention is the women in power. You know, the women is a very important. As a woman, I have to say that because we are the important part of the family, so we should be supported. Women should be supported by development projects, stuff like that. So youth and women are very important in this continent, should be taken in consideration in the partnership. Thank you so much.
Professor.
For giving me the opportunity to contribute also to this very important topic on the future of the AU-EU relationship. Mr. President, I want to thank the presenters for being very candid in their discussions and for exposing the challenges even in the relationship. Because we are talking about a relationship between two major continents which are very diverse, very different in approach and in everything. With that in mind, it means we must think of how a relationship can be molded in a manner that it is a win-win relationship. Because the minute you know that we have different priorities, we have different perceptions, we have different views on matters, then we will be careful to establish relationships that can take us far without destroying any of ourselves. Mr. President, this is 25 years. Celebration or reflection, whatever that would be. But really the relationship between Africa and Europe should have been the most natural relationship. First, because of the colonial history, and secondly, because of proximity. We are so close, and I read a book that was written by a commissioner, an EU commissioner, that we are so close, and yet our relationship is distancing us. It should have been natural for Europe and Africa to be close. But I don't want to go to the history of where things came from. But, Mr. President, the African, Caribbean, and Pacific and EU relationship started with the Rome Agreement of 1957. And it was actually a joint development agreement. But we cannot, looking back, it means it failed, totally failed. Otherwise, that relationship should have been going on. In the year 2000, which is the 25 years ago, is when the ACP EU Joint Parliamentary Assembly was established. I'm bringing this history because I was in that delegation from Kenya. I come from Kenya. So I didn't introduce myself, Margaret Kamar from Kenya. And I was in the delegation of Kenya to the joint parliamentary group between the ACP being African, Caribbean, and Pacific, and the EU for 10 years, from the year 2007. And I will be touching on why I found a challenge even in the way we are looking at things. Maybe we had not analyzed, and maybe this kind of analysis should help us. Because even in the discussions at the parliamentary level, between the parliamentarians from these ACP blocks and the EU, you will not see where the discussions were going to. I don't know currently whether we are getting better progress, because parliamentarians are the same ones we are calling the people-centered approach. You use parliamentarians to be able to establish what the people actually want, because these are representatives of the people. But there, as it is, the views of the people are brought in, the motions are debated and shelved. And I say that because we reached a point when we thought there was an intention to fragment Africa, the Caribbean, and the Pacific, so that the EU deals with each bloc, which I think is the approach that is being used now. And there was a fight against that by parliamentarians. They say we really need to approach it first as a relationship that is win-win. We have had problems of the win-win for many years. One of the examples I want to give is the discussion that we had for almost 10 years on the EPAs, the European Partnership Agreements, which were the key to the trade between Africa and Europe. And that was the one that was going to really push us very far. But nothing was moving, and the East African bloc that in its own rules requires that the East African community can only negotiate trade as a bloc was completely distorted. Because then the proposals were the EU must negotiate with Kenya on its own, it must negotiate with Uganda on its own, it must negotiate with Tanzania on its own, and yet these three partner states had agreed on their own when the East African community was established in its own treaty that trade shall be negotiated as a bloc because they have a joint customs union. And then you ask yourself, what was the intention of let's fragment it so that we deal with individuals? This is what is causing suspicions. And if we really want to go beyond these 25 years in a more harmonious way, then we need to ask ourselves, what is the win-win relationship that we are looking for? As most people have said, as somebody has, a member has said, from the same 2000, a lot of things were happening. China-Africa relations were coming in. India-Africa summits were coming in. Something they borrowed from the EU, but the EU itself was going to break it. They started breaking what they started. When they were dealing with the bloc, they became attractive, and those blocks were attractive to the outside to the extent that India was seeing it, China was seeing it, but Europe wanted to break it. So we need to ask ourselves, going forward, what kind of relationship are we going to say? My sister has mentioned it. The reason we have a lot of immigration to Europe is because they are following their resources. The minerals that leave this continent, instead of being processed within the continent so that we have our youth in the continent, we have jobs in the continent. Nobody would go for anything else. They're just going following jobs. And if they are following jobs, and yet we are migrating the minerals, we don't expect anything less. The world is now becoming a village. And one of the things that we must discuss, even between ourselves and Europe in this kind of relationship, is how we can make it secure for everybody. We can make it win-win for everybody. And we must have laws, immigration laws. And thank you, Mr. President, we only passed yesterday an immigration model law. For an immigration model law must ensure that everybody is respected. A worker in Kenya should be respected the way a worker in France is respected, because they are workers and they are following nothing. And in our case, in the continent, if only the African continent can wake up the way we have been told Trump gave us a wake-up call and export nothing raw, our jobs will be here. We will contain our youth, and the mobility is going to be much less than it is currently. So going forward, we are talking of Africa contributing 3% to the global GDP. Why are they contributing that? It's because they only harvest and sell, whatever they have. Somebody else is building their own GDP using raw materials that have come from Africa. So really, when you are calculating GDP, what are you using? Are you using the raw material, or you are using the product that has been made, which is giving GDP, displacing GDP? I think it is good when the meeting takes place in Luanda that they actually discuss the displacement of GDP from Africa to other countries, because this is what is causing us problems. When we go to West Africa, and I've been to some of the countries, I realized that even the central banks are still in France, I was told the other day. And we went for observer mission in Madagascar, and there was no difference. We couldn't see any difference. So we need to reflect, and we hope our heads of state in this summit will reflect and ask themselves, what is win-win, and why is it that we are still at 3%? When can we stop our raw material from going to build GDPs for other nations, or instead of building for ourselves? With those remarks, thank you, Mr. President. I think we need to rethink the way we relate. Thank you.